Okay, so this lecture, we're still within chapter 5 in the explorations textbook. So chapter 5, we already covered some of it, which is primate classification. This lecture is still somewhat related to classification and anatomy, but we'll start to delve into things like diet, locomotion, and sexual dimorphism. So let's talk about diet first. So we learned in the last lecture that primates in general, as an order, we have dietary plasticity, which is basically a fancy way of saying that we have a flexible, diverse, varied diet. That even though we will focus in on certain types of foods, some primates will eat mainly insects, some will eat mainly vegetation, some will eat mainly fruit, some eat a variety of all those things. Even though we may focus in on one primary dietary food source, generally primates will have the ability to switch and navigate food sources as the environment changes, as they may be dealing with droughts or with rainy seasons. They have the ability to switch food resources, and we call that dietary plasticity. But we'll talk about also where primates will focus their diet depending upon their taxonomic category. So the first one we're going to look at is insectivory, which, just like it sounds, that would be a primate that consumes mainly insects. So generally, because insects are like little pockets, little small bursts of energy, little pockets of energy, this tends to be the diet of small-bodied primates. So the lower order strepsirrhines are generally insectivores. They also eat tree gum as well, but we'll talk about that here in a moment. But in general, the insectivores are going to be the lower order strepsirrhines and a few of the platyrrhines as well. So these primates tend to be small-bodied. They tend to have really pointy molars, and that you can kind of see it here in this picture. I mean, you're seeing the incisors in this region here, but even the molars are really sharp and pointy because it allows them to kind of break up those insect exoskeletons. Insects, like I mentioned, are little small bursts of protein, little small bursts of energy, and they're also pretty easy to digest. So the primates that are insectivores tend to also have relatively simple digestive tracts. Okay, so insectivores, small little bursts of energy, primarily small-bodied primates like lemurs, lorises, tarsiers, marmosets. So mainly the strepsirrhines, the tarsiiforms, and a few of the platyrrhines. Really sharp, pointy cusps to break up insect exoskeletons and tend to be relatively easy to digest. Okay, so that's insectivores. All right, next type we're going to talk about is gumnivory. So gumnivory, so when I say gum, I mean the sap that's inside tree bark. So generally, those that are gumnivores will also tend to eat both insects and tree gum. So just like insects are little small bursts of energy, they tend to be small-bodied primates that are insectivores slash gumnivores. The tooth comb, which we learned about right before spring break, but the tooth comb here, when the incisors are kind of jutting straight forward, you're looking at the mandible here, the lower jaw. So when the canines and incisors just kind of jut straight forward like this, that's called a tooth comb. So that tooth comb has two functions. It can function to kind of jab into the tree bark to get that sap out. So it jams into the tree bark to get the sap out. And it's also a grooming feature. But just like insectivores, gumnivores tend to be small-bodied primates like lemurs and lorises. They tend to have small mandibles and jaw muscles. They have that feature, that dental feature called the tooth comb that allows them to puncture the tree bark to extract the tree gum slash sap. And they tend to supplement their diet with insects for additional protein, an additional calorie source. Okay. So insectivores and gumnivores generally go right together. So they tend to be small-bodied primates. So mainly our strepsirrhines, small mandibles and jaws, that specialized dental feature called the tooth comb, which functions to allow them to puncture the tree bark to extract the tree gum. And they tend to supplement their diet with insects. All right, next type we're going to talk about is folivory. So folivory, think foliage. So think foliage, think vegetation. So folivivores have a diet that emphasizes foliage or other plant parts such as stems. Generally, this diet, and this is sometimes surprising to students, but actually, this is the diet that requires the most extensive chewing force and the strongest jaw muscles. So, this gorilla here, this gorilla is predominantly a folivivore. And as we learned last week, or I'm sorry, the week before spring break, as we learned last lecture, gorillas are the largest, at least of the living primates, the largest bodied primates, with males being 4 to 450 pounds, females being 2 to 250. So you can imagine if they're just eating leaves, they have to eat a whole lot of them. So generally they're spending, 50% of their waking hours just chomping on vegetation. They have this feature called the sagittal crest. So I like to call it the bony mohawk feature running down the center of the skull. So that sagittal crest here, so here's the nuchal crest in the back, and then here's the sagittal crest on top of the skull. So the function of that protrusion is to be an anchor for the chewing muscles. So the chewing muscles for a gorilla begin all the way down here at the ramus. They tuck underneath the zygomatic bone, the cheekbone, and then they attach all the way up here at the sagittal crest. So just for comparison, our jaw muscles are going to stop just right above our ears, just barely above our ears. So, and generally what that sagittal crest means when there's massive jaws, massive dentition, sagittal crest, that generally means a diet of rough, tough food items. So folivivores tend to have large molars with shearing crests. They tend to have large, robust mandibles and jaw muscles. They tend to have the sagittal crest feature, the bony mohawk running down the center. So some examples of primates that practice predominantly folivory would be, of course, gorillas, colobus monkeys, and howler monkeys. Okay. Now, colobus monkeys and howler monkeys don't have that sagittal crest because they're much smaller bodied primates. So even though they're eating mainly vegetation, they don't have to chew quite so much of it because they're not supporting a massive body size like the gorilla is. Okay, so the flivivores eat mainly foliage. Doesn't mean they don't occasionally eat insects and fruit and things like that. It just means that they're eating mainly vegetation. All right, next food type, or dietary type, I should say, is frugivory. So that means, just like it sounds, they're eating predominantly fruit. Fruit-eating primates tend to be relatively medium-sized. So there's a gibbon and an orangutan in those two pictures there. So they tend to be medium-sized primates. They tend to have relatively their molars tend to be low with rounded cusps. So those molars kind of act the molars in the back of the mouth act like juicers to squeeze fruit and reduce pulp. So they're medium-sized mandibles, medium body size. This is the most common dietary strategy in primates, or at least I should say most primates they have fruit as some portion of their diet. It's a very common strategy for primates to include at least some portion of fruit. So some examples, most of the platyrrhines and New World monkeys, cercopithecoids, gibbons, orangutans, and some lemurs and lorises will also consume fruit. Okay, so frugivory, mainly fruit eating, relatively easy to digest and provides an intermediate or medium amount of energy. So we tend to see that frugivores are medium-sized primates, medium-sized mandibles, and they have molars with low rounded cusps that act like juicers to squeeze fruit and reduce pulp. All right, questions so far? Feeling good? Okay. All right, so essentially, what kind of evidence can we draw from the dentition? So and those of you in lab will get a chance to do this a lot as well. So oftentimes anthropologists, primatologists, paleontologists are very interested in teeth. And, to the layman, you may not quite understand why that might be. So let's talk a little bit about why anthropologists care about teeth. So in forensic anthropology, we can use teeth to determine how old that primate was. So we can look at dental eruption rates and also attrition, which is wear on the teeth, to help us determine how old that primate was. Biological sex in those primate species that are particularly sexually dimorphic. We can look at overall canine size, and we see that primate males are going to have larger canines and primate females have smaller canines. So for those species that are sexually dimorphic, we can use canine size to determine male versus female. We can oftentimes, once we get into the section where we learn about the Neolithic Revolution, our transition from hunting and gathering to predominantly agriculture, we saw a huge uptick, a huge increase in something called dental caries or cavities. So these are abscesses in the back of the mouth generally. So the most, not that you can't get a dental cavity in your incisors or canines, but generally the most common location for dental caries is in the back of the mouth where the molars and premolars are. So that can be a reflector of nutrition and general health. Mating system. So again, those primate species that are heavily sexually dimorphic tend to be more competitive and tend to have polygynous mating strategies. So one male, multi-female. So we see that canine dimorphism is related to competition for mates and access to reproductively receptive females. So if we notice that there's high levels of sexual dimorphism in the canine size, that can not only give us information about whether this primate was biologically male or female, but can also give us information about what was that primate's reproductive strategy? Was it polygamy? Was it polyandry? Was it monogamy? And that can also give us information, or at least help us develop a hypothesis as to that primate's mating strategy. Behavioral patterns, so we can also look at the use of specific body parts that cause characteristic wear patterns. And of course, diet. We can look at tooth morphology as an indication of what that primate ate. So like we mentioned that the frugivores have the low rounded cusps that almost act like a fruit juicer. The folivivores have those shearing cusps that kind of chop up that vegetation. The insectivores have those small pointy little teeth that lets them break up insect exoskeletons, and everything in between. All right, so just a little bit of vocab terminology to kind of get out of the way. So the term anterior and posterior, this probably is going to look familiar if you're currently taking my lab class, but for those of you that aren't, so anterior just means in the front or forward facing. So the anterior dentition would simply mean the dentition that's in the front of the mouth. So for us as primates, the incisors and the canines. So on each side, for humans and for other apes and old world monkeys, we have 2 incisors and 1 canine on each side in the front. And then the word posterior just means in the back. So posterior would be the teeth in the back of the mouth, which are the premolars and the molars. Okay, so as far as diet goes, the posterior dentition is actually more useful because when you think about it, think about taking a bite of an apple, for example, or even taking a bite of a hamburger. So the teeth in the front of your mouth, those are going to be it's responsible for that initial bite, that first bite. But the teeth that do most of the work are your premolars and molars. So generally, if you're interested in diet, the premolars and molars are going to be the most useful teeth to look at. Okay. All right, so let's talk questions about diet before I move on to locomotion. Any questions at all about diet? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. And now we're going to talk about locomotion. So this term locomotion just simply means movement. How is that primate predominantly moving to get from point A to point B? So it's a little bit more vocab to get out of the way. So the term forelimb is talking about the arms, so the upper or the front limb. So it's the humerus, that's the bone in our upper arm, and then the 2 bones in our lower arm, the radius and the ulna. So the radius is the bone that connects to your thumb. The ulna is the bone that connects to your pinky finger. Okay, and then when you accidentally hit your elbow on the corner of a table, what you're actually hitting, instead of your humerus, because they always say the term hitting your funny bone, is actually not the humerus, but what you're hitting is that kind of U-shaped structure at the proximal end of your ulna. Okay, so forelimb is the humerus plus the radius and ulna. So that'll be important here in a moment. And then the hind limb is your legs, or the lower or the back limb of your body. So your femur, which is the long bone in your thigh, and then the 2 bones in your lower leg, the tibia and the fibula. Tibia is your shin bone, and then the fibula is lateral to, or to the side of, your tibia. And then some more vocab words, arboreal versus terrestrial. So the term arboreal means mainly tree dwelling. The term terrestrial means mainly land dwelling. Now, of course, primates are not necessarily going to be exclusively one or the other. But when you hear that a primate is an arboreal quadruped, for example, what that means is that they are predominantly arboreal, meaning they spend most of their time in the trees and they're moving on all 4s. And then if you hear the term terrestrial quadruped, It means that that primate is mainly terrestrial. They spend the vast majority of their time on the ground, and they are mainly land dwelling. And they move on all fours, terrestrial quadruped versus arboreal quadruped. All right, let's talk about the specifics. Okay, now there's going to be 6 types of locomotion that we're going to talk about. The first one is called vertical clinging and leaping. You may see it abbreviated as VCL. So vertical clinging and leaping, abbreviated as VCL. So the body is mainly oriented vertically, and movement occurs by leaping from tree branch to tree branch. So vertical clingers and leapers are going to have longer hind limbs. So their legs are essentially going to be longer. So their legs act as kind of this springboard. So their legs are going to push off of the branches, and it almost is going to look like they're hopping. I'm going to show you a video clip here in a moment. But essentially, they're using mainly their legs to hop from branch to branch. Of course, they're using their arms. Their arms are important for stability and to help anchor them once they get where they're going. But they're going to use predominantly their legs. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture. I should have gotten a better picture for this one. But you can see how long the legs are, because here's the thigh, and then here is the bottom part of the legs here. So here's the tibia and the fibula area. This is the femur here. So they have really long legs. So this form of locomotion is practiced in the strepsirrhines and the tarsiiforms. So the tarsiers are also going to have this unusual tibia and fibula bones that act kind of as shock absorbers as they're vertically clinging and leaping from one place to another. Okay, now with these locomotion ones, I'm going to show you an example of each different type, because I really think for this one, for understanding this particular lecture, it's important to be able to visually see what these forms of locomotion look like. Okay, so I have a short video clip for each of these types. Let me exit out of this PowerPoint. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's just do this and then go back. Why is it not letting me exit? Okay, let's do that. Okay. All right, here we are. Okay, so as you're watching this video clip, mainly just sit back and relax and enjoy it, but notice a couple key things. So notice, are the arms or the legs longer? What are they using predominantly? What is their predominant? Are they using their legs more, or are they using their arms more? Which one are they favoring? And then notice just anything unique you notice about this form of movement. Okay, so this will be an example of vertical clinging and leaping. And this is a shafaka or an indri. We'll see here in a moment. It's either a shafaki or an indri. Let me turn on the. Okay. Oh yeah, the captions are burnt in on this one. That's why.
Deccan's Shifaka. This youngster is 3 months old and already practicing the vital skill of leaping. No one cluster of trees is large enough to sustain a whole family of hungry shifakas. This mother and son need to seek out another pocket of vegetation, possibly hundreds of meters away. They must run a deadly gauntlet. These limestone shards stand more than 100 meters tall and are sharp enough to shred human skin. But Shifakas have thick, rubbery footpads and spring-like legs that can leap 9 meters in a single bound. These lemurs have evolved into blade runners. Safely across, mother and son claim their reward. The fresh, juicy leaves they need to survive.
All right. So, what did you guys feel like? Were they using mainly their arms or their legs to move?
Their legs.
Mainly their legs. Did you notice anything unique or surprising about the way they were moving?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Like the way that they can jump sideways is insane and catch themselves with their little toes on that rock.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, right? A pretty impressive mode of locomotion that they were those really sharp, pointy looking rocks. They were really kind of just beautifully, elegantly just moving their way through it without much trouble, it looked like. So it was pretty interesting to watch. That's why I like that particular Shafaka video. I mean, nice job, everyone. Those are vertical clingers and leapers. So we see that in the lower order strepsirrhines and the tarsiiforms. All right, next type of locomotions. This is going to be called brachiation. So brachiation is essentially the reason I put this one next. It's essentially the opposite of what we just watched. So they're actually using predominantly their arms rather than their legs to locomote through the trees. So brachiation is a form of what they call suspensory locomotion. So they hang or suspend themselves using their arms. So they use this arm over arm action. So the gibbon up here in the top picture is showing you a great example of arm over arm brachiation. So they are essentially the opposite of the vertical clingers and leapers. They have very long arms or forelimbs in comparison to their legs. So their humerus plus their radius and ulna is going to be much longer than their femur plus their tibia and fibula. And they have very long arms and curved phalanges. Phalanges are the finger bones. So the best brachiators, the true brachiators, are the lesser apes, which include the gibbons and the siamangs, and they are masters at this form of locomotion. This form of locomotion is somewhat limited in the great apes simply due to their body size. So thinking back to our last lecture, the term lesser ape just simply means that they're smaller bodied, right? It doesn't mean that they're any less evolved or, or any lesser at anything. They're just smaller body size. So the gibbons and the siamangs, the lesser apes, are master brachiators, whereas the great apes, even though they can locomote, they can locomote using brachiation. It is somewhat limited simply because their body size is so much larger. Okay, but when apes are locomoting in the trees, they are usually using what we call semi-brachiation. Okay, all right. So let's watch a video of a gibbon using semi-brachiation, or using brachiation, I should say, sorry. All right. Let's go back here to our clips. Okay, so same deal, guys and gals, when you're watching this video clip, just try to notice, are they using their arms or their legs more frequently, or are they relying more heavily on their arms or their legs? And is there anything unique that you notice about this form of locomotion? Anything surprising or unique? Make sure our volume's okay. Okay.
This is Samar. He's 8 years old and lives with his parents and younger sister in a tight family unit. Gibbons are typically monogamous, and his parents have been together for many years. His father, like all males, has black fur and white eyebrows. Females are a paler buff color, like Samar's mother, clinging tightly around her waist is Samar's 1-month-old little sister, Raya. She still needs a lot of looking after. As a baby, she's even paler in color. Her fur won't get its true adult coloring for another 5 years. The family takes a well-traveled trail through the forest. They follow each other in single file. Mom, carrying Raya, pursues Dad, with Samar bringing up the rear. Moving through the forest canopy requires incredible skill and dexterity. Samar's father is a real expert. His swinging motion is a technique known as brachiation. Gibbons have evolved long, strong forearms. Highly mobile joints in their shoulders and wrists enhance their fluid movement. They can reach speeds of 35 miles per hour and cover nearly 30 feet between trees. These graceful gibbons are the true specialists of the canopy. But Samar needs a bit more practice. Close one. For Gibbons, the occasional fall is part of life. The important thing is to catch another branch and keep on swinging.
All right, so what did we notice about that form of locomotion? First of all, are they using mainly their arms or their legs to move through the trees?
Their arms.
Mainly their arms. Excellent. Was there anything unique or surprising that you noticed about that form of locomotion? Was the speed at all surprising? Were you impressed or surprised by the speed that they were able to move through the canopy?
I thought they were
Yeah, they
falling
moved really
up.
fast.
Yeah, they were. I think they said 35 miles per hour. They have both Gibbons and Siambangs at the LA Zoo, and generally they are some of the most active, especially with looking at the form of locomotion. So if you're going to the LA Zoo, we'll likely be able to get a pretty good look at this form of locomotion when we go on that field trip. Okay, so I basically think of the brachiators as the opposite of the vertical clingers and leapers. The vertical clingers and leapers are using mainly their legs. The brachiators are using mainly their arms. Okay. All right, next type, third type of locomotion we're going to talk about is arboreal quadrupeds. So break that word up. Remember, arboreal means mainly tree dwelling. Quadruped just means movement on all fours. So they're using both their hind limbs and their forelimbs to move through their environment. Okay. So arboreal quadrupeds tend to walk and run along horizontal surfaces and jump from branch to branch. They have prehensile. Remember that term prehensile simply means grasping ability. They have prehensile hands and feet. They tend to have long phalanges, and they tend to have a scapula, which is the shoulder blade. Their scapula tends to have a slight lateral orientation on the side of the body. And most of the arboreal quadrupeds also have that specialized feature called the prehensile tail. So thinking back to our last lecture, the word prehensile again just means grasping ability. And the prehensile tail is only found in some of the platyrrhines, some of the New World monkeys. Most of them have it, but not necessarily all of them. But it is the prehensile tail is only found in the New World monkeys. So if you see a monkey hanging from a tree branch by his or her tail, you know it has to be a platyrrhine. There's no other possibility. So arboreal quadrupeds, movement on all fours in the trees. They walk and run along horizontal surfaces and leap from branch to branch. They have prehensile hands and feet, and also generally prehensile tails as well. They have a shoulder blade that has a slight lateral orientation on the side of the rib cage here. And most of them have that prehensile tail. Okay, so let's watch our video clip for this type. This is going to be spider monkeys here. So spider monkeys also have a pretty unique way of locomoting. So I want you to watch these spider monkeys, and I want you to think about, are they using mainly their arms or their legs, or is it equal? It's also a possibility that's about equal. So watch carefully and think about, are they using mainly their arms or their legs, or do we feel like it's equal? I want you to notice how the prehensile tail is used, and also take note of how there's another baby in this video that's also showing you how he uses his prehensile tail. So just kind of look out for those as we watch.
They don't look like a regular primate that has 4 limbs. They have an additional limb that is their tail, so they really look as like spiders when you look at them in the canopy. Spider monkeys are one of the largest primates in the Americas. They can weigh up to 10 kilos, and they are quite amazing because when you look at them, and probably that's why they get their name, they look like spiders. Prehensile tail is a tail that can be used to grab from any substrate. It is like having an additional hand, literally, only that with a single finger. In fact, they have like a bearskin pad on the underparts of the tail, but it has a very, very detailed precision in order to grab from any kind of substrate. Spider monkeys start using their prehensile tails very early. In fact, after a couple weeks old, baby spider monkeys will start to ride on their mom's back. And it's very interesting that they wrap their tails around their mom's tail, and this is like a seat belt, like a security belt that they have for hanging tight to their mothers. I think prehensile tail is a very unique adaptation because monkeys that have a prehensile tail are able to hang from their tail while they're foraging and then free their hands in order to be more efficient. They can also hang from their tails while wrestling and playing with other members of the group, but especially when they're moving along or across the canopy, they're able to secure themselves while jumping from one tree to another. So it's an additional security for them, especially being large-bodied primates that live 30 to 50 meters above the ground.
So how do we feel about the spider monkeys? Were they using mainly their arms or mainly their legs, or kind of equal shared dominance? What do we think?
I think equal.
Yeah, they're pretty equal. Now, the arboreal quadrupeds will maybe have a slight preference for their hind limbs, but they're pretty equal. I mean, when you're looking at this picture here of this one's actually a capuchin monkey. The ones in the videos were spider monkeys. But you see that, yeah, the hind limbs look like they might be a little bit longer than the forelimbs, but not significantly, right? So it's pretty much what we call shared dominance. So it just means that they're using all four limbs about equally, and they're also using their tail as well. Okay, so we call that shared dominance. Did you guys notice how was the infant, how was the baby utilizing the prehensile tail?
Like a little seatbelt.
Yeah, like a little seatbelt to hang on to mom. Pretty cool, right? So those are arboreal quadrupeds. So it's mainly the platyrrhines. So the New World monkeys, so things like spider monkeys, capuchin monkeys, howler monkeys. Those are our arboreal quadrupeds. And we'll see several examples of those at the LA Zoo as well. All right, next type, our fourth type we're going to talk about is called terrestrial quadrupedalism. So terrestrial quadrupeds, they are shared dominance as well. So they have movement on all fours, but on the ground. So remember, break that word up. Terrestrial just simply means predominantly ground dwelling. Quadrupedal means using all fours to locomote. So they use arms and legs about equally. We call that shared dominance. So that means that their forelimbs and hind limbs are approximately equal in length. They tend to have shorter and more robust hand and foot bones. So those primates that are arboreal tend to have longer curved phalanges and they tend to have flexible joints. Whereas terrestrial primates tend to have shorter, more robust hand and foot bones, and they tend to have more stability in their joints. They do have a tail, but it is not really used for anything. The terrestrial quadrupeds don't really need a tail, so it's kind of just a leftover adaptation that they don't really use for anything. So they may have tails, but they are not prehensile. So it just means that their tails do not have any grasping abilities. Okay, this is the one I do not have a video clip for you yet, but we will later on in this lecture, we're going to watch some terrestrial quadrupeds for a different reason. But let's go ahead and move on quickly to the knuckle walkers. So this is type number 5. So knuckle walking is a form of terrestrial quadrupedalism. So it's a type of that involves, just like it sounds, walking on the knuckles of the forelimbs, so the hands essentially. So this is seen only in the great apes, so only in gorillas, chimpanzees, and bonobos and orangutans. But it's mainly seen in gorillas, chimps, and bonobos because they spend a lot of time on the ground. Okay, so the knuckle walkers will have a forelimb, so their arms are slightly longer than their hind limbs. So this allows for their chest to be elevated off the ground. Okay, so that just like it sounds, they're going to be walking on the knuckles of their hands. Okay, so that's the dorsal surface of the middle phalanges. Okay, so I have a video clip for you to watch here on this one. 2 video clips for this one, actually. So it's going to show you, it's actually a little clip from, they interviewed one of the stunt managers of the Planet of the Apes videos, or the Planet of the Apes movies, and it's going to show you how he taught the actors to walk like a chimpanzee or a gorilla or an orangutan. And he's going to show you how there's slightly different ways, even though they're all knuckle walking, they're all practicing this form of terrestrial quadrupedalism, specifically knuckle walking. They do it slightly differently. Okay, so that's why I like this particular clip. All right, so knuckle walking, we're going to see this only in the great apes. So the forelimbs are going to be slightly longer than the hind limbs, not significantly, but slightly. And notice how they have this unique way of locomoting depending on whether we're looking at a gorilla, orangutan, or chimpanzee.
Hi, I'm Norm with Tested, and I'm here with Terry Notary.
Hi,
You are
Norm.
the
Yeah.
choreographer, the stunt coordinator, the guy who teaches all the other actors how to
Yes.
be an ape.
Yeah.
And you're in the
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I play Rocket in the film as well. Yeah, so
it's a
it's
great
a lot of
performance.
hats, but it was fun. It was a lot of work. We really tried to make something special, and I hope the audience likes it.
So, what do you tell an actor like Judy Greer, who's in the movie? How
Yeah.
does she become an ape? What's the training regimen?
Yes. Well, it's funny because when actors come in, they say, "What do I do? What do I do to be an ape?" And it's not about doing anything. I tell them it's about undoing, and it's about figuring out what it is that makes us human, and you peel those layers away, and what you're left with is an ape, an animal. And so we're all animals, and we all have this deep-rooted, connected animal in ourselves, and that's what apes have. They have a calm, a quiet a sense of presence that is so deep. It's almost like tapping into a deeper frequency, within you.
So all the things I learned through school, good posture and everything.
Yeah.
All the manners, take that all away.
Take it away. Yeah, exactly. All the social conditioning that you've been subject to, you realize that it's just a product of our environment that has made us, given us an identity so that we can go out and succeed and be successful and survive in this world.
And don't mind the spandex
Exactly.
suit with the dots on it.
Yeah.
So you have props also that you use to instruct them. These are actually
these are
from
arm
the movie.
extensions. You want to try them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So here's a left and a right.
Okay.
And so these are some of the arm extensions that we've made that help us with the anatomy, so we're more anatomically similar to the apes because they have longer arms and shorter legs than us. So when you start, let's start over here. We'll start from the basics, and we'll start in with a quadruped run, okay?
Okay.
So a little bit wider stance here. Yep, good. So I want you to go left, right, left, right, left, right, boom, boom. So it goes hands, left hand, right hand, boom, boom.
Right.
Good. Not bad.
All right.
Bad. That's pretty good. Okay, try it again. And now I want you to start to lead with the right shoulder. So this will be your lead arm. Your arm will be lead. So you're not going to be straight ahead. You're going to kind of lead and crab it. We call it crabbing. So left, right. Boom, 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 boom. Good. Not bad. Yeah.
So how do the different types of apes and different animals, how are they all different?
Well, they all have a little bit. They're quite different, and I can do a demo for you if you want. The orangutans are incredibly economic. They're like the second most economic animal in the world, next to the sloth. So super economic. So
Sort of energy
they're really. Really slow, and there's this sort of comics sensibility to them. And then gorillas are much more postured. They have a tendency to sort of, they have this bravado with a lot of show, and they sort of pull themselves along. And chimps are much more active, much more wiry. And they're just like.
Now, how does someone get into motion performance and motion capture as an actor? Is
Yeah.
that something, like, do you do traditional acting first, or is that like other schools?
Theater is always great ground. Yeah, acting classes, and it is acting. It's just straight plain acting, and the costume goes on after. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tara. This is amazing.
Thank you.
And the
Thank you
movie
very
comes
much.
out soon.
Nice to
Thanks.
meet you. Thank you.
All right. So that was knuckle walking, which we see only in the great apes. And you saw that there's a slight variation depending upon what type of great ape. Right, and one more video related to locomotion or related to knuckle walking and bipedalism here. So this one will be a little bit of a window into next unit when we start talking about bipedalism, but this is going to give you a comparison of a chimpanzee, which is a knuckle walker, versus Lucy, which is an Australopithecine or an early hominin, an early member of our lineage, and of course, modern human bipedal locomotion. So I want you to notice the differences, notice anatomically the variations that have occurred. And just so you know, there is no sound to this video, so don't worry if you don't hear anything, but it is going to animate it and it's going to give you a written description of each. And I'll kind of narrate it for you a little bit here too. All right, so we've got the chimpanzee all the way on the left, the knuckle walker, Lucy, the early human in the middle. So you see that they both have elongated skulls with a small brain case. They have face and jaws that jut out from the brain case. We call that prognathism. They have shoulder blades and joints that are suited for climbing trees, so more flexibility in the pectoral girdle. They have long arms and fingers with long arms and hands with curved fingers. And here we have Lucy, an early human compared to a fully modern human. So Lucy and human share a spine that connects directly beneath the skull to keep the head steady in a bipedal stance. They have a robust and broad basin-shaped pelvis to support the upper body and hold it upright. They have angled thigh bones, so angled femurs that place the weight directly over the strong knee joints. And they have compact and arched feet that support the full body weight with each step. And then it's going to show you all three of them together. So the chimpanzee, the knuckle walker versus Lucy, the early human. So we've got the small, relatively small brain case, the prognathic face and jaw. Then with the human, Lucy's got the spinal column that goes directly beneath. Lucy shares with the chimp the flexible pectoral girdle and the longer arms and curved phalanges. And then Lucy shares with the human the broad, robust pelvis and also the angled femur bone. And also the arched feet that act as shock absorbers. All right. Questions about any of that? And that's just a little window. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot more about bipedalism once we get into our unit on human evolution. Questions so far? We're feeling good? Okay, let's talk sexual dimorphism. So this is a term we've heard before. Sexual dimorphism, just as a review, refers to differences or variations in overall body size between males and females of the same species. So typically, high levels, primate species that have a high level of sexual dimorphism, also generally going to be more competitive for access to food, resources, and mates. Okay, so a high level of SD generally means a high level of competition, whereas a low level of SD is going to mean a lower level of competition. So typically we find a high level of sexual dimorphism in primate species with polygynous mating strategies. So polygynous means one man or one male that mates with all of the reproductively receptive females in the group. Okay, so most cercopithecoids, old world monkeys, and the great apes practice polygyny. And then those that have a low degree of sexual dimorphism are found in polyandrous and monogamous mating strategy species. So polyandrous species are mainly the New World monkeys, and monogamous is only found in the lesser apes, the gibbons and the siamangs, and of course some humans. Okay, so generally, high levels of sexual dimorphism found in the Old World monkeys and the great apes, except for us. And then low levels of sexual dimorphism found in the New World monkeys and the lesser apes, the gibbons and the siamangs. Okay, so let's watch a little video on this. So this one is going to show you. We're going to look at Hamadryas baboons, and we're going to look at how their mating strategy is also indicated by their sexual dimorphism, and not only just in their body size, but also in their canine size. So as you're watching this gelada harem, I want you to take note of a few things. How are the males signaling their dominance, whether it's verbally or non-verbally? How are they signaling their dominance? I want you to take note of the overall body size. Are the males larger than the females? And if so, are they significantly larger than the females? How do the bachelors come into play? So there's going to be a group of primates called the bachelors. And then also, how do the females come into play in this particular example? Okay, so this is going to be a polygynous mating strategy, and you're going to see the main harem. You're going to see the main harem group along with a group called the bachelors. So look out for sexual dimorphism, look out for how do the males signal their dominance, and also look out for how is the female involved. So even though the female may not be dominant in this particular scenario, she is still involved in the overarching dominance hierarchy. So how are the females involved is also something I want you to look out for. And as you're watching, also keep an eye on locomotion. So these primates will have a primary mode of locomotion, but they will also occasionally do another mode as well.
Groups of mothers and their young, a harem, gather together to form troops of up to 800 monkeys. Gelada's hands are usually busy plucking grass instead of grooming, so to keep in touch, Geladas have become the chattiest of all monkeys. The gossipy banter can sound to scientists like sentences with words or even names for each other. Most agree it's often used to defuse tension. And in Geladas, there's a lot to be tense about. There are gangs of young males trying to steal away the women from the family harems. Each handful of females is guarded by a single male, the harem master. The spare boys try and tempt the girls away, hoping the resident father figure doesn't notice. The males flash teeth at each other. They may fight, but it's usually just showing off in case the girls are watching. There's a lot of flirting on both sides. And then, if an innocent-looking female is tempted to wander off past her guardian, he has to decide what to do. Girls mostly sneak off secretly for affairs. This is a blatant challenge to his authority. The illicit couple just sit. The suitor seems to be using his hand to hide his grimace. He probably doesn't want trouble. Chimps, baboons and macaques may also try to look innocent when they break the rules. This is a complicated social problem. Using your brain to control societies is called Machiavellian intelligence, after a 16th century courtier who wrote on manipulating political power. Instead of launching into an attack, the politician here tries to grab a baby. Monkey etiquette dictates nobody attacks anyone holding a baby, so they're like living flak jackets. The mothers are worried and quickly scoop up the youngest. Here, the two males face each other. The family man backs towards one of his more loyal wives, calling for support. One of the youngsters suddenly switches from mother to father. This should calm things down. With the youngster attached, the father's protected, and the harem should unite. But it can go wrong. The youngster is slipping off. The family are frantic. The harem master has no protection from attack. The bachelor is finally driven off with a little help from the mothers. But the fathers are meant to guard the precious young. He knows he's in all sorts of trouble. If the infant dies, the mothers may not support him again. Our brain, too, wrestles with our own similar problems. We are as social and as competitive.
All right, so what I'm going to have you guys do next, we're going to do a little work on our breakout rooms. And I want you to discuss a video we just watched. So I want you to think about how are the males signaling their dominance, verbally and non-verbally? Did you notice sexual dimorphism? And if so, did you feel like it was a high degree or a low degree? And how are the females and the infants involved in the overarching dominance hierarchies here? Okay, and then once you've done that, if you have time, I want you to also, for the main four categories, so for strepsirrhines, platyrrhines, cercopithecoids, and hominoids, I want you to think of at least 3 physical characteristics that identify that particular group. So at least 3 physical characteristics that identify the group. And then what is their primary locomotor strategy? So how do they move? Okay, so I'm going to put you guys in groups and then I'll type it into the announcements so that you can see those questions. Let's go ahead and stop our recording.